All right, as AI investment shifts from building bigger models to powering them more efficiently, one Australian company is preparing to list with a very different approach. SCX AI says the next phase of the AI boom won't be about bigger data centers, but smarter infrastructure built for AI inference. Earlier, Andrew Gagan spoke with Chief Executive of SCX AI, David Keane, and asked him what sets the company apart from other AI players.
Become Australia's first listed pure play AI infrastructure company when we list in August. I think for investors, it is important to understand the investment thesis behind SCX. As you said, what we're talking about is almost the opposite of the build bigger AI factories narrative that's been dominating the market. Rather than building sort of ever larger AI campuses that require enormous new power connections, water, and planning approval, SCX has built an AI inferencing platform that sits inside existing commercial Australian data centers and is using a next generation of AI chip called a Samba Nova RDU. Now, these chips are specifically designed for AI inferencing. Inferencing is simply the word the industry uses to describe the concept of using AI in applications and agents. And unlike the GPU, which many people have been talking a lot about as connected to AI, these new chips are designed from the ground up to run these large language models more efficiently. And what that means, of course, is lower power consumption, simpler deployments, no requirement for chip level water cooling, and significantly higher throughput for these new AI workloads that are coming. So we see that as a core requirement for Australia as we build the AI capacity that we need.
So, in other words, I mean, talk about the sovereignty of this then, David, that the data, the models, the workloads, they all stay onshore here in Australia.
That's exactly right. And we believe Australia has no choice but to do that. We must preserve value in this AI transition for Australians, not just ship that value overseas. And whilst certainly Australians will continue to use AI created overseas, we need our own systems right here to make the difference. And our view is that shouldn't simply mean encouraging big tech to store their data in Australia. It should mean that Australian organisations have control over the infrastructure processing their data so they can understand which laws apply to it and make decisions without relying entirely on these overseas technology providers. And we're really pleased to see the Australian government coming out and talking about the importance of this, as it is something that will matter to Australians in future years.
Well, in fact, on that point then, David, given we heard from the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago about this blueprint, if you like, for AI here in Australia, have you been speaking to the government about what you're doing in terms of the sovereignty that you're offering? And in particular, when you mentioned about lower energy footprints, no water cooling required, for instance, for those data centers, um, and also in terms of your potential customers that they're likely to be in the government sector.
Well, we think Australian governments will require access to sovereign AI, but I think what the Prime Minister said is that AI legislation may be necessary to require data centers to minimise their water use and maximise energy efficiency, and actually to pay for additional water infrastructure and energy that's required. And this really means that operators who aren't focused on efficiency are going to be facing headwinds in their unit economics. Our view of building AI is by focusing on that inferencing capacity, the actual practical AI tokens, which are the things that AI applications and agents use. We can build infrastructure that simply uses less power and does not require those water cooled AI chips. And the result of that is better unit economics. And I think that's a real benefit to all Australians. And when you combine that with sovereignty and control over data, we're starting to think about a key requirement for us as we start to modernize our economy. Certainly productivity is going to be a key part of delivering success for Australia into the future. And if we do this right, but don't forget the impact on the environment, we can achieve some strong goals.
So, David, where are you at in terms of your stage of your build out at the moment?
So SCX has fully operational what we call our Node 1, which is our first AI factory, live today running in New South Wales. And that's delivering service to hundreds of Australian organisations that are using it today. It's amazing how many Australians have been forced to send their most secure workloads overseas just to use AI. So Node 1 being operational today gives them that option. As part of the IPO, we are fully funding Node 1 and Node 2, which is our second AI factory here in Australia. And together, those factories will give SCX significant capacity to deliver these tokens, these AI inferencing workloads that we think are necessary for customers. So we're looking forward to seeing the both nodes fully operational, and we think Australians need access to this capacity.
David, what response have you had from prospective investors, both here and where you are at the moment in the States?
Yeah, actually, I'm on a bit of a tour in the United States, and I think one thing that's insightful is how much the market over here has started to realize the kind of the larger trends in the AI market. We're certainly seeing that investors are starting to understand that we're moving to a world where the creation of these tokens is what's going to power AI applications and agents into the future. That is really where a lot of the smart money is going towards. And it's been really pleasing to have a lot of engagements. And I think Australia is leading the way. We have an opportunity, I believe, to lead in the Asia Pacific region and to provide capacity for Australians, but also to provide capacity for folks in our region. And I think we're being recognized on a global scale. But I think SCX is really focused on deliver that capacity in a way that is leading on unit economics, but also delivers the performance for some of these new agentic applications that I think they're going to come. So we're pleased with response. We've had, I think, very, very lot of interest in Australia from people who have been supporting the IPO, and folks can do their research on some of the names that are involved. But look, I think Australians are also realizing in the investment community that we need access to this capacity. We need the tokens. There's going to be demand for that. It is the one piece of infrastructure that we must have if we're going to make AI successful for business.
So, David, what's the timeline for the IPO and what are the numbers involved?
Yeah, so the company is raising $40 million in the IPO, which is underwritten by Canaccord and Henslow. The IPO is actually just closing as we speak, so we've had a tremendous response from investors, and we'll be out in the market in early August and looking forward to see the reception the company gets.